graphics come through strong.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order and welcome you to the Hampton-Wilbraham Regional School District School Committee meeting. It is 6:30 p.m. I see that David Sanders from Wilbraham Public Access Channel is recording. Is there anyone else here recording the meeting? Okay, we will begin with roll call in alphabetical order. Cheryl Caruana. Here. Tim Collins.
Present.
Sean Kennedy.
Here.
Lisa Murray.
Here.
Rich Redeker.
Here.
Mike Tirabassi.
Here.
And Michelle Boudreau here. If you'd please stand, Sean will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do not have student representatives this evening, so we will begin with the school calendar 25-26 vote.
I have nothing new to present on this. This is the calendar that was presented at the last meeting and tabled to this meeting.
Has this been shared in the public other than at the meeting last time?
Nope.
So I'm curious because sometimes we get a lot of eyes looking at something. They might see something that we don't see, whether it's a Jewish holiday or something like that. But I'd rather hear the feedback before we make a decision than after we make the decision.
I personally compared it to the district calendars of other districts that have already released theirs.
Is it comparable?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Does anyone want to make a motion?
Move to accept the calendar.
Second.
Okay. Any questions or discussion? Okay, so we will do roll call. Cheryl? Aye. Tim?
Yes.
Sean?
Aye.
Lisa?
Yes.
Rich?
Aye.
Mike?
Yes.
And myself, aye. So motion carries 7-0. Thank you. We'll move on to the FY26 budget process update and assessment letters.
Good evening. So on March 6th, you voted a budget, and that entailed some assessments to the towns by the regional agreement. We're compelled to notify the treasurers in each of the towns of the assessed amounts for the coming fiscal year by April 1st. However, we knew by virtue of a vote that the Wilbraham Finance Committee took not yesterday, but the week before, that there was a difference in what they voted versus what we had indicated to them what the assessment would be. So when I sent the assessment letters to meet requirements of the regional school, the regional agreement, I did put a cover memo on that to say that the school committee would be is aware of the circumstances of the finance committee's vote, and was also going to take up the topic of the budget for at tonight's meeting, and so that they might get a subsequent assessment letter, depending on what your actions are going to be. So the portion of the assessment that Wilbraham voted on last Wednesday was that was different from what you had recommended was the operating assessment, and they lowered it by $153,367. Which has a corresponding effect on Hamden as well, if we were to do that. If we were to adjust our assessed amounts to match that assessment for Wilbraham, the corresponding assessment for Hamden would go down by $38,465 for a total reduction of $191,832. So if you choose to make an adjustment to the budget, there's a couple different ways to do that. If you choose to use E&D to sort of cover that gap, That's on the sort of revenue side, so it doesn't require changing the budget. If you were to use some other source of funds, like school choice, then that would actually alter the budget, so we'd have to alter the budget amount as well as the assessments. If, on the other hand, you choose to adjust, say, D&D usage, then that would just be an adjustment to assessments. And of course, if you don't adjust the budget at all, then it stays as is, and we'll follow up with the appropriate treasurers and notification that you decided to stay with the budget you voted last March 6th. So I can provide any other information you all want, and I can also sort of offer motion language if you need it. But I think at this point, it's sort of up to you guys to decide whether you're going to change some of the parameters of the budget to meet with that the Finance Committee recommended for their coming town meeting.
Is it reduced by town meeting, or is it reduced by the Finance Committee?
Just the Finance Committee. It was their recommendation for their budget. So as they go through each department, they make a recommendation for each of the department areas, and they reduce the operating assessment for the regional schools by a little over $150,000. But it's not been voted by town meeting yet. No, that will come in May.
So I did see in the letter that was sent to us that the state said that whatever we come up with has to go before town meeting. Unlike last year, it seemed like the Finance Committee put their numbers before town committee, not ours. Is that correct?
So I was here last year, so I'll take that one. Last year on the Wilbraham warrant, both numbers appeared. The school committees, well, actually, let me take that back. There was a discussion of creating the warrant with the school committee's number and then the recommended number by FinCom, both being listed. As you know, there was that meeting right before town meeting. I think the warrants may have already been printed at that point, so I think that is the way it appeared. And then when we actually got to town meeting in Wilbraham, it was the agreed upon figure that was moved.
So I believe that, if you guys can hear me, what they did last year, they feel met that requirement, because the number that the school committee had put forward was included as a no. However, the article in the warrant was worded for the budget that the Finance Committee had decided upon, not the school committee. Originally in the document, that's what was going to go forward if we didn't make an agreement. Whether that, I don't think that meets the spirit of the rule, although it may have met technically requirements of the rule. And we should also keep in mind that they always have the clause on the warrant that if there's going to be a change to a warrant that's been put on the agenda, the person who asks for the change has to specify a funding source for it.
So if I can, I just passed around something I got from our town accountant. Levy limits of private on Proposition 2.5 from the Division of Local Services, Mass Department of Revenue. It's really good. It's almost too simple. Sometimes I wish it would sometimes I could go in and explain stuff a little more. But this I thought was very helpful in understanding our present situation. So it's up to the committee to decide, do we want to go with our number and challenge it at town meeting, and hopefully some citizen would come up with a vote at Wilbraham town meeting to change the number to our number, or do we want to try to meet the towns halfway? Because as I'm hearing now from last night, I had heard that we were $250,000 in the plus of hitting the $1 million levy limit before we have to go to a 2.5 override, another 2.5 override. But that now that we are $250,000 into that $1 million, so there's only $750,000 leeway left in Wilbraham. So it's just up to the committee, like, what did you decide? I had presented before to reduce and use excess and deficiencies, whether it's money from this year's excess and deficiencies or next year's, or however we want to do it. Or is this something that we want to challenge the towns and bring it up and, you know, ask for that money back during the coming year?
Was that that letter that got emailed or sent to us by John said that clearly the FinCom and the selectmen can't put their own numbers before town meeting. It's the school committee's numbers that go before town meeting.
Yes, that's true, but they're doing it anyway.
I would also like, at our last school committee meeting, there was a suggestion to invite Wilbraham FinCom and Hampton Advisory to the meeting. We do have members from our Hampton Advisory here, so I would like to invite you to the conversation. I know we haven't heard much from you, and we're having a conversation only about Wilbraham FinCom, so we'd love to hear from you. You can just grab the microphone and make sure that you press the green button. You're welcome to join us at the table. If you're more comfortable there, that's okay too.
And do you want to gavel in? Do you have a quorum?
We have a quorum, but we're not a posted meeting. We're
Okay.
not going to deliberate as a body tonight.
Okay. How you doing, Doug?
I'm fine, thank you. Good evening. Thank you for inviting us to the school committee meeting. Just for everyone's information, Hampton has not yet voted our recommendations for town meeting. We actually are still waiting on one or two numbers before we have the final figure. We have our public hearing scheduled for April 14th, is the point at which we will take public input, following which we will then vote our recommendations. As it stands right now, we're looking at an increase on our operating budget, the expense side of our budget, of between 7.5% and 8%. That's carrying the school's current number. Which we have the capacity to fund with our levy limit excess, but it would exhaust pretty much all of it. The assessment from the school district alone will more than eat up whatever our new growth figure in our 2.5 are. And I'm assuming people understand what that means. It's somewhat inside baseball jargon, but bottom line is that the revenue does not increase as quickly as the expenses. And we will make decisions in the fall at our special town meeting in terms of what to do with stabilization, free cash, and to try to mitigate that increase. I don't want anybody, particularly anybody who might be listening to this, to think that we're looking at a 7.5% or 8% increase in our tax rate. No, that's not the case. I give that to you as background because the numbers that are currently being discussed, the total reduction figure of 191,000 and change, is a pretty modest figure in comparison to the entire budget. It's a pretty small percentage, less than 1%. And I would suggest that the committee carefully consider whether or not to take on a floor fight in one or both towns over this amount of money, given the potential for the delays that occur. Having been through, and Kathy, I think you also went through the two-town meeting. When a school budget fails, it goes back to the school committee for another vote, then it goes back to the towns for another vote. If that fails, it goes to a joint town meeting. That all takes a long time, it costs a lot of money, it causes a lot of consternation. And in the meantime, the district is operating on a 1/12 budget. So you will also be incurring unemployment costs, which I believe the district is reimbursable, so it's dollar for dollar, whatever we pay in unemployment, we're going to end up paying, we're going to reimburse unemployment for it. I think when you consider the potential downside to this disagreement in comparison to the amount of money at issue and the potential for ways to cover this delta, I would encourage you to consider revoting the number. Frankly, as a show of good faith to the towns, we ask all of our departments to compromise when they're submitting their budget requests, and they do. Our different departments go without things, and we defer things. And I think the townspeople would appreciate seeing a similar effort on the part of the school system. Kathy, John?
No, I think you covered it very well.
Based on that, I'd like to make a motion as a show of good faith to the towns of Wilbraham and Hamden to decrease the ask from Wilbraham by $153,367 and the amount asked of Hamden, have it reduced by $38,465 for a total of $191,832.
Sean, are you proposing funding from E&D?
Thank you.
And the funding would be from E&D or efficiencies through the year or however excesses that we find as we traditionally find each year.
I'll second it if it's funded from E&D.
Yes.
If it is from E&D.
No matter what it is, it'll end up being from E&D. So if we find some cost savings or something like that, that would eventually turn into E&D. So at the end of the day, it's all E&D.
Would it be possible, so you had presented tables that were preliminary options for adjusting the potential budget gap. So table 1, there were three positions that totaled $180,000. That would not be, I mean, they're impactful, I suppose, but one was not filling a payroll position that's currently vacant, and that was $60,000 savings. The second was a general reduction of expense lines across all maintenance lines, perhaps staff reduction, $40,000. And the third was not filling a currently vacant instructional coach position, and that was $80,000. Would it be possible to use that instead of taking from E&D?
It would be. Just to speak to that a little bit in a little bit more detail, I understand the concern the committee has of dipping even farther into E&D. We had the same situation last year, and I think the same concerns are on the table now. One of the thoughts I have about this is the state budget process is still very much underway. As you know, we're advocating for additional funds in the House and Senate and the reconciliation version of the budget. What we could do in order to preserve the E&D funds to the greatest extent possible, but also maintain the possibility of getting back to fully staffed, is hold off on filling those positions until we see how the state budget resolves. If that would be acceptable to the school committee.
So last year,
That's a good idea.
okay, last year, I believe we used almost all of our E&D, if not all of our E&D. So we had zero E&D. We used every penny of E&D last year. We had $400,000 of mold remediation from the middle school, and we still ended up this year with $1.5 million in E&D. Yes, it's a lot of money. This was a year that we got back a lot of that special ed circuit breaker money came back to us. But still, we do have money that comes back every year in E&D, anywhere between $500,000 and $750,000. I would say that I think with that $309,000 that we would have left over, I think let's fund those positions, the positions that we had before, and let's take that money out of E&D. We still have $300,000 there, plus any other monies which will be certified. When do we usually have it certified? In September, October?
Yeah, it depends on how well we close books, but we're supposed to try to get it done by the end of September, end of October.
Yeah, and we will know that by that time.
How long have these positions been vacant?
The payroll position has been vacant for a few months. The instructional coach position has been vacant for most of the academic year. The other reduction that's noted in the third line is a position that's currently filled. And then the materials cost is not a position.
And on top of these savings, so those are salaries, that does not include benefits that we'd be paying?
That's just salaries, correct?
Could I ask a question? Excuse me. The instructional leadership
Can
Sean,
coach.
you use
what
the
is in the
microphone?
real world?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Day-to-day activity in the district with those positions being open. Unfilled.
There is a lot less support for teachers in implementing new curriculum. One of the things we always felt was that we were stretched with coaches, academic coaches to begin with. We have received lots of requests from middle school administration to devote more coaching time to the middle school, which is something we haven't been able to do, being down one coach. I mean, we did the best we could, but it made it even harder. Lisa?
I just wanted to add that we did hire a,
Can you turn your microphone off just for 1 second?
we hired a consultant that we had worked with through DESE, a professor from Worcester State, to work part-time at Mile Tree to provide those supports. So we haven't been completely without the coach. We've had a limited amount of hours, maybe 15 hours a week to devote to Mile Tree, and then our other literacy instructional coach covered the other 3 elementary schools. So we haven't been without it completely. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. And then the main impact on not having someone in the payroll position, this is the only position that's dedicated to payroll in the district. So in order to keep the checks flowing to people, there's been overtime in our offices. Other people have had to come in and take that person's responsibility.
May
Can
I ask a
amend my-
question?
Oh, go ahead, yeah.
Thank you. The instructional leadership coach, is that person going to be assigned to one particular school, or is it district-wide where that person would visit each school for X number of hours?
The instructional coach position is a literacy coach and splits the time between 2 different elementary schools. So it provides literacy support for teachers and building principals at 2 of the elementary schools.
And what about Wilbraham Middle School, where you said that the teachers have been coming forth with requests for additional coaching for the teaching staff? What's going on with that?
As the superintendent said, we have had requests. However, our staffing is very limited at the elementary level, so we've tried to provide a small amount of support in literacy and math with regards to coaching. But because these were primarily elementary literacy and math coaches, there wasn't a lot of time in their schedule to provide the level of support that I think has been requested.
I'd like to amend my motion to include that the funding sources come from, that where the money comes from to fund this $191,000 will be decided by the superintendent. And let him decide what is important, what's not important, and he does have that $500,000 in E&D to pull from if so be.
I don't think that we can do that, Sean.
Why don't you think we can do that?
I think we should specify a funding source, and I wanted to make 2 comments. One, listening to everyone, I think this really needs to hit home the point. All the time at meetings of other public bodies, we're constantly hearing the comments of school districts should be looking for efficiencies. Of course, they could be looking for efficiencies. It's a big budget. This is no big deal amount of money and stuff. And I think that people aren't paying respect to the fact that the school budget has been making operational cuts continuously for at least the last half a decade, if not decade. And that there is no more fat left to trim, in John's own words, that he's made comments on before. The concept that looking for other efficiencies and stuff, it's cutting meat that's real impact to the district. That being said, our budget includes, a huge increase this year, and I think that I'm going to be with you, Sean, on that. I think that we should. My preference would be to fund the increase from E&D. The main reason is because my biggest hesitation about using E&D, and for an addition, right, is that, that'll bring us up to about $1.2 million worth of E&D used to fund the operational budget. And as you pointed out, Sean, we only had $700,000 in E&D last year. So we don't have, we don't necessarily have the expectation that we will ever see an E&D of $1.5 million anytime soon in the future. Every dollar of E&D that's put into the operating budget is potentially a budget deficit for the next year. Now, if the additional monies come through from the state on the advocacy campaigns, and we do see more money from the state, then we will realize that in a higher E&D at the end of the year. And so that will help offset the problems that I'm really worried about coming for next year. So that's why I personally feel okay using E&D to fund this, and I think that John should feel free to fill those positions. He's asked for them. They're in the budget, which means that he thinks that they're needed. And John, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that. But we've just heard multiple people that really were advocating for how we've been hurting with these positions unfilled and deficits that are rolling down to the kids.
Are these positions posted? Have they been posted?
I don't think they're currently posted.
As I don't have a second, I withdraw my amendment to the motion.
Okay, any other discussion on budget? We can move forward on roll call. Tim, sorry, you put your microphone on.
That's okay. We have told the public that we passed a budget that doesn't reduce services. Now, by doing this, will we be going back on our word to the public?
I don't think that you'll be going back on your word. You'd be filling every position that was in the budget. I do think that it's important. I've said this many times, but I think it's important once again to say there are over $600,000 worth of reductions in the budget when you take into account the reductions from the closure of TWB and the reductions of going to a 3-tier busing system. So there are those reductions, or efficiencies if you want to call them that, but that's consistent with what we've had in the budget from the beginning.
Okay, if there are no other comments, we will do roll call vote. Cheryl? Tim?
No.
Sean?
Aye.
Lisa?
Yes.
Rich?
I couldn't hear what anybody is saying, but I support Sean's motion.
Let's repeat the motion, just so you know what you're voting on.
And also, I couldn't hear the other votes. Speak next, so.
The motion was to, as a show of good faith, to Hamden and Wilbraham to take away $153,367, or reduce the ask to Wilbraham by $153,367, and reduce the amount of the ask to Hamden by $38,465. And that money would come from E&D.
Cheryl voted yes. Tim voted no. Sean voted yes. Lisa voted yes. And now it's your turn.
Yeah, I support Sean, so yes.
Okay. Mike?
Yes.
And myself, yes. So motion passes 6-1. All right. Thank you. Yes.
Could I speak about?
Of course. Just make sure you press the button, please.
What I'd like to ask is to consider on the capital expenditures on the Hamden side and Wilbraham side, the Kubota, if I could get a few more, some information from you
My name's John Matthews. And what I need to know is what's the hours on that unit that you're going to be replacing? And there's no other equipment going with that. It's just the,
So I can confirm there's no other equipment that goes with it. It's just the
yeah.
I'll say vehicle.
Yep.
I don't know the hours on the existing one, but I can check that and get that
If
to
you
you.
would, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And the other thing is to, on the Green Meadows, just to consider the parking lot and extend the fire road, to have that reconsidered. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of you in the coming weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we will move on to discussing the 3-tier busing schedule.
Thank you. I'll just wait for Aaron to get this presentation up. This won't take long. Okay, thanks. So everyone within the sound of my voice, and probably much farther, is familiar with the transportation problems our district has experienced over the past several years. In fact, the governor of the state is familiar with the transportation problems our district has experienced over the past several years. And the core issue is persistent driver shortages. Recent study from the Economic Policy Institute revealed that the total number of bus drivers in the U.S. is still down 12% from pre-pandemic levels, and that pre-pandemic level was still down 22% from the staffing we had before the Great Recession. So you're talking about basically a third of the workforce doesn't exist anymore. In other words, the driver shortage is not likely to be resolved anytime soon, which is why the district made the decision to adjust its transportation model to fit the size of the available workforce by implementing a 3-tier bus model. I'll pause to highlight the greater economic efficiency of the 3-tier model. I know some school committee members were surprised to see that our total transportation costs for FY26 increased by $170,000. But if it had not been for the implementation of the 3-tier model, we'd be asking for $500,000 for transportation increases. The $330,000 difference is the savings we realized by implementing the 3-tier model. In addition to being more cost-effective, the 3-tier model should be more reliable because we're projected to have enough drivers to actually run the routes. For the next school year, we're reducing the number of buses from 33 to 28. You may recall that we reduced 3 buses 2 years ago, so this will bring the total number of reduction in buses from FY23 to 8. Nevertheless, that fewer number of buses still needs to cover the same map to get students to and from school on a daily basis. This year, 20 minutes was scheduled for buses to cover the map, a time frame that has rarely proved to be adequate because bus routes had to be combined when drivers were not available, most recently today. Next year, due to the reduced number of buses, 40 minutes will be rescheduled to planned time to cover the map between each pickup and drop-off cycle. The logistical challenge is to find a way to maintain our current number of instructional hours and minimize disruption to families, including the routines of our own staff, to ensure that students have supervision while doubling the time allotted for buses to cover the map. A complicating factor is the varying length of our school days. The length of the middle school day is currently 10 minutes shorter than the high school day, and the elementary day is 5 minutes shorter than the middle school day. That makes it harder to design a system where buses arrive on time, especially when you put the school with the longest day on the first tier. Those problems became obvious when we looked at the preliminary schedule that had been shared with the public. In this model, everything works fine in the morning, but buses don't arrive to pick up students at the elementary or middle school until 20 minutes after classes end. And that would potentially leave students unsupervised because the teacher's duty date ends 15 minutes after the last class. The problem arises because the school with the longest day is on the first tier, and there's just no way to make up the difference to get buses back in time for schools with shorter days. So one way to solve that problem is to put a school with a shorter day on the first tier. Then the fact that the next school has a longer day works in your favor. This gives buses more time to complete their first run. After many conversations with the bus company, I believe this option being shown now is our best option. This plan would put the middle school on the first tier with a start time of 7:35. That's 5 minutes earlier than the current start time. The next tier would be the high school with a start time of 8 o'clock, which is 25 minutes later than the current start time. In my opinion, that's a more appropriate start time for high school, given what we know about the sleep need of adolescents. And elementary schools would have the third tier with a start time of 8:55, which is 25 minutes later than their current start time. In this model, all of the schools have a shift of less than half an hour, which is one of the things I said was one of my hopes when we started this process. And the high school, I think the shift is one that actually better aligns with their health needs. The buses still make it back in time to pick up all of the students, so you don't have the supervision problem at the end of the day. We still save the $335,000, and we still have a fleet that matches the size of our workforce. And importantly, a lot of discussions of a later start time for high school, we still bring older students back before the elementary students so they can provide supervision for the younger siblings. I did take a look at another arrangement. I did receive some feedback on the preliminary schedule saying that some elementary families would like to see, could we get their start time earlier? This kind of extends that same rationale or process that I used in the first alternative a little farther. Remember that both elementary and middle school have shorter start times than the high school, so there's an argument for placing both of those tiers before the high school. And the same medical evidence that supports an 8 o'clock as being a better start time for high school would say that 9 o'clock is even better. However, I don't recommend this for some practical reasons. The first is the magnitude of the impacts on everyone's routine. As opposed to alternative one, this has many more families moving a half an hour or longer from their current schedule. A second problem with the model is the bus company can't guarantee they'd be able to get buses back to the high school on time because young students need someone to meet them at the bus. And if adult is not present, then they have to take the students back to the school. And this makes the time needed to complete the elementary drop-off unpredictable. Finally, I think such an extreme shift of high school schedule would have a negative impact on our student athletes and CTEC students. Our school day would be so far out of sync with CTEC that it's really hard to imagine a way for the students to be able to connect with the high school schedule for the other half of the day. And our student athletes would miss many of their fourth block classes, especially during the fall season. I'll note that in another community where I worked, we did move high school start time to 9 o'clock. It created a tremendous hardship for athletes. Surprisingly, it turned out to be the golf team that was impacted the most because you can move everything, but you can't move tee times. If I had stayed in that community a little while longer, I would have asked the high school to implement a rotating schedule to mitigate that, so it wasn't always the same fourth block every day. However, we can't do that here because we have students that share a schedule with CTEC, and so there's no real way to implement a rotation here. I just wanted to show that I did my due diligence to see if there was a way, and there is a way, but I don't think it's a way that's on balance in the best interest of our students. So I want to close by sharing something that may be an option in the future. I'm not certain if this will work, so this is just conceptual rather than anything else. Our transportation system is currently designed to accommodate all eligible riders even though ridership varies. As a result, we've all seen it, some buses, especially at the high school, have a great deal of excess capacity. If we instead designed our routes based on actual riders, rather than running mostly empty buses, we might be able to load middle and high school students at the same time. Then we'd only have to cover the map twice, and we could keep start and end times much closer to their current schedule. I know we'll be looking at this question in the policy subcommittee, so I offer this just as a conceptual piece to show what might be possible if we make some more fundamental changes to our student transportation practices in the future. And with that, I'll stop so that you can offer your reactions to this plan.
I'm just glad that for the high school, if they get out at 2:30, that's not going to affect any tea times or anything that they have.
Yep, they should be fine.
I think you should do this, but if you really wanted to rotate and still be work with the other schools, you could do rotate the morning and the afternoons within the afternoon, and then that would still let it work with the vocational schools. But I'm not saying you do that.
Do we need a motion, or is this something that,
It's not listed for a vote. You've already approved it. I just wanted to share this with you all to see if anyone wanted to throw a challenge flag before I start implementing it.
no, this looks good, this is solid.
I'd like to voice that I'm appreciative of all the hard work that's gone into this. Personally, I like your recommendation for alternative one. I like that there's the opportunity for high school students to be home before elementary students may be arriving, because I'm feeling there are a number of families in town that are large, and they may really be hoping and counting on the high school students providing at least a short period of time of supervision for the elementary age students. So I think it's well thought out. I personally like the alternative one.
Thank you.
I've talked to so many parents, and it's all this, whatever string we pull is going to affect someone positive or negative, Maybe someone has decent coverage, for their families in the morning, but they don't in the afternoon, and vice versa. I do think this one is the most minimally evasive, if that's the right way of saying it, onto their needs. Thank you. I'd like to see what feedback we get, but it seems that this one would be the one with the least amount of hurt, I would say.
This has been worked out with LPBEC.
It has.
The times seem
I
reasonable.
feel good about the times.
Great. Can you explain one thing quickly? So it's a 3-tier model. We're moving from a 2-tier to 3-tier. Can you quickly explain, is it one tier of busing that's specific to each school?
No,
Can you explain how that works and what's the difference between it, besides the rejection of 4 buses, what's the difference between a 2-tier and a 3-tier model?
It goes to what I was talking about, covering the map. Currently, we have all of our buses cover the map twice. So they deliver high school and middle school students to school, then they go back out and they pick up elementary students. That's called 2 tiers because they cover the map twice. In the 3-tier model, you have all of your buses available to go out 3 times. So they would be first going out to pick up middle school students, then all those buses would be available for high school, although we might not use them all, and then they'd all be available to do the elementary runs.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, so next we'll move on to the superintendent's contract. So we are looking for a motion to renew the superintendent's contract for the term of January 1st, 2025 to July 21st, 2029. So that's 4 years and 20 days.
So moved.
Second.
July 1st, I'm sorry. Oh, July 1st, 2029, I'm sorry.
Still moved.
Still second.
Trying to slip that one by you. Okay, any question or discussion? Okay, so we'll do roll call vote. Cheryl? Aye. Tim?
Yes.
Sean?
Aye.
Lisa?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Before we move
Thank you,
on
John.
to new business, I do want to take a moment, and if we could just take a moment of silence, and I apologize for not doing this earlier. I just want to take a moment to remember Matthew Michael Thomas. He was a night custodian at School Road School for 3 years, and he was well loved by all the teachers and students in the School Road community, and I'm sure the community at large.
There was a beautiful article that Cheryl just showed me that's in the Wilbraham Hamden Times. There it is. It's absolutely beautiful. I recommend everyone read it.
Thank you. So we will move on with new business, auxiliary school funding.
Is it okay if I call Karen Romano up to join us? The reason why is that Karen put a group together which met last Thursday, which I was asked to attend, where we started preliminary looking at different options and stuff on what members in the community can do. And I feel having her up here would be helpful. Is that okay? Sure. Do you mind, Karen? So what we did is we had a group of parents that met and we talked about different funding sources, rather than not hitting the same funding sources that everyone else is hitting, like that one is hitting, that the boosters are hitting, such like that. And we also looked like what we'd like to do with the money. For example, funding a grant writer for the district, maybe funding some more BCBAs or psychologists, however you want to look at it. And it was some really good ideas. Karen, would you like to take it?
Sure. So we had a group of probably, I think there were around 7 of us. The theory behind the meeting this past week was really just a brainstorm on what are some ideas that we all had on where we might be able to access funds, sort of separate from what the school district is able to do, but what we could do from an outside perspective. So we talked about that piece, and really we're looking at ways that we could, one of the big things that came up was ways that we can access our alums. There were several of us in the meeting that are alums of the district. And so we were really trying to figure out if there's ways that we can access them, not just from a funding standpoint, but also as a way of us being able to use information about our alums to say, like, what have they accomplished? Like, for us to be able to celebrate what our alums have done from a sort of PR perspective, and also to access alums as a resource for internships and business connections and community connections. So that was one of the big things I think that came out of the meeting, was trying to figure out how we can do that. And so we're starting to start to make those connections and see if that's a way that we can access additional resources and additional information. But really, outside of just Wilbraham and Hamden, I think was the big thing that came out of that meeting, is that we don't need to be sort of so parochial with our with our look at things, and instead we can reach beyond that and try and see, because I think that there are a lot of people, I think a lot of what's come out of some of these financial committee meetings and the school committee meetings and the select board meetings is that I think that there are a lot of alums from the district who would really be interested in being able to give back to the district. In lots of different ways, and so whether it be time or financially, and so we're trying to figure out how to tap into that, but again, doing it a little bit different than some of the other organizations in town are already doing, because we don't want to, it's not a situation where we want to kind of jump into the pool of what everybody's already doing. So we're sort of looking at trying to broaden the scope a little bit, so that we might be able to tap into businesses and people that aren't currently part of what other groups are looking at, I guess is the easiest way. Sean, I don't know if there's...
Yeah, just one other quick mention. So as a school committee member, I can't go up to somebody and say, hey, listen, can you donate some money to this organization for the schools? But I am allowed to participate in the planning and stuff like that and getting this off the ground. There's a lot of energy from a lot of people in this community, and I applaud Karen for taking the initiative and the other parents that came to that meeting. Very, very positive, and again, just thinking outside the box, and I'm sure you'll be getting some phone calls to say what's on your list, and you know, and who knows what can be accomplished when, well, anything can be accomplished when parents put their minds to it, right? So thank you, Karen, and thank you, everybody else.
School committee, are you interested in having a discussion? Or is it just a presentation? Is that it?
I'd love to see if anyone has ideas or anything, please.
I'm just curious, this pickleball thing kind of took off, and people are very excited about it. Are we charging for court time? We are?
It depends. We have a building use schedule, and I guess the way I would summarize it is the amount of the fee increases with your distance from being a student. So if it's an activity that is our students essentially, then there's really no fee. But if it's a community-based group that's not students, there's a larger fee. If it's an outside group, then it's an even larger fee.
For the auxiliary group, how does that connect the district? Is it a gift to the district? What about like compliance? Would it be, does the group determine where the funds go to? Are you saying that you're fundraising for a specific, you know, grant writer or BCBA, and that's what it's going to? And then does that then determine like, well, we're hiring, you know, a BCBA for a specific building? How does that work?
So, first of all, it's sort of in its infancy. So I think some of that's still being fleshed out. But I think conceptually, I think the idea is what we want to do is figure out how can we create a pool of money that can then sort of continue to fund itself. Similar to what you would see as like an endowment for what many of us see for private schools. And then I think the thought process that we had during the meeting was this would be a wonderful opportunity for when we've had a lot of these conversations about the budget this year. And there's been, I know at one point, Principal Hill made the mention of the fact that no one's ever come to him and said, we've got money, what could you do with it? And so that was really the conversation that we had was, okay, look, well, let's be that source. Let's figure out how to get the money, and then let's be the source for the school district to be able to start to reach beyond what we're currently doing and to give the teachers and to give the district some of those wishes that they've had that we're just not in a position to accommodate. So that's conceptually, I think that's what we were looking for. And those things that Sean mentioned, those were kind of the things that bubbled up to the top as we were talking, that we went, oh God, it would be great if we had a grant writer that would then be able to additionally help bring more funds into the district. And, you know, we know that there is a need in district for, you know, for psychologists. We know that there's a, you know, that there's certain needs. You know, we know that there's always a need for more paras. So it was really just a kind of a brainstorm of what do we think the, you know, the sort of current needs are. But the theory is let's find money and then figure out from the district how it could be used as a way to really elevate what we're doing, as opposed to, nope, you have to use it for this or you have to use it for that. But it's more so like, look, we've got this, what can you do with it? is the theory.
Yeah, like grants from what, you know, the teachers would apply and stuff like that. They would sit down, there could be discussions with the superintendent and the group. Hey, this is what we could really use. And it's not just one-offs, you know. I threw down, well, we had talked about that, John and I had a conversation once and he said, or I think he said it publicly here, that the difference between our school district and the #1 school districts in Massachusetts is about $3,000 per student, which is roughly $9 million. So I said, how's that for a first tier goal? Let's shoot for that, a yearly $9 million whatever. Now that might be totally, yeah, it might be totally out of whack with reality, but why not reach for the stars? Why not reach for something that could really change things profoundly in the district without it costing the townsfolk of Hamden or Wilbraham and without costing our budget? And you know, everyone already gets hit up in town for certain things, and reaching to those that are outside that grasp was the initial idea. And again, infancy, but at least conversations are happening.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else?
Thank you, Karen.
All right, we will continue with public comment. Is there anyone here that is interested in making public comment this evening? No one has signed up, imagine? Okay, we will continue with subcommittee updates. We'll begin with the curriculum subcommittee.
No update.
Perfect. So move on to the planning subcommittee. Give me 1 second. Okay, so I'm going to first be updating on the discussion between the Hamden and Wilbraham Select Board. They've met twice. Their most recent meeting was last night. So last night they were discussing, there was a Wilbraham Middle School cost sharing proposal. So it was a framework that the town administrator had presented to both boards that's designed to promote fairness and protect both towns' interests through cooperation. So just for context and background, Wilbraham's position is looking for cost sharing from Hamden for capital improvements to Wilbraham Middle School, which is currently intended to serve and currently does serve both towns as a middle school. And then Hamden's concern is there was a reluctance to invest in a building that they do not own, control, or have equity in. So they kind of viewed any sort of, they were viewing it as poor financial investment. So with this proposed cost sharing framework, so Hamden would pay its share of future capital improvements upfront based on the proportion of student use. Each capital improvement will be assigned a defined useful life in years. Hamden's contribution is divided across the term to calculate an annualized cost. And then if for some reason Hamden students stop attending Wilbraham Middle School before the term ends of that defined useful life, Hamden would receive something like a refund, which would also include depreciation for the unused portion. So just an example of that was if there was a capital project cost for $1 million, Hamden's share would be the 20% at $200,000. Let's say the useful life would be 10 years, so that's $20,000 a year. And if Wilbraham Middle School closes in year 8, Hamden would be refunded roughly $40,000. This does not include depreciation because that would be 2 years at $20,000. So Hamden's financial participation would solely be for capital usage and does not realize any equity or ownership interest in Wilbraham Middle School. So this model would acknowledge and address some of Hamden's investment concerns because the challenge for Hamden was asking Hamden to invest in a building it does not own and may not use long-term. But with the upfront payment, with the refund mechanism, it protects Hamden from losing its investment if students are moved or if the school is closed. So Wilbraham would retain 100% equity, and obviously if they sold it, they would get all of the money. Hamden would not hold any equity, and there would be no benefit from the sale of the building. So this also brought up, obviously, having the joint capital plan, which currently exists. So, looking at a multi-year capital needs plan collaboratively with the district, with the Hamden and Wilbraham Select Board and capital planning, and prioritizing those capital improvements. And one of the notes was that something that has to be discussed would be excluding previously recommended but an incomplete capital projects from the 2015 feasibility report. And then the other note was that if projects are financed through debt rather than paid up front, a different cost allocation or refund approach may be required. So that was a framework. Both towns thought it was a great starting point and a great framework. Each town was going to discuss it and kind of dig deep into the details and work and discuss it amongst themselves. They will be discussing and reviewing this cost sharing proposal and meeting again Tuesday, April 22nd at 5:30 at the Hamden Townhouse. So again, this was just for equitable cost sharing based on usage, not ownership, for Wilbraham Middle School.
Michelle,
Yes.
I had a question. So, in the hypothetical situation when Hamden would be offered entitled to a refund in that proposal, where exactly would the money come from? Would it be paid to them by Wilbraham, who has equity in the building? They're not going to be looking to the school district to fund that, are they?
I would think not. I would think it would come from the town, but I can't say for certain. That would be something that would be outlined.
Yes, we need to, I would be, that's my only caution. I think that's an awesome plan, but we need to make sure the funding source is clearly specified for Hamden's refund, because that could be a huge amount of money to come out of the school budget.
Right. So this was just presented last night just as a framework for them to kind of dig into the details and discuss how it would work and impact each town's. And obviously there would have to be some sort of like memorandum of agreement with including the regional agreement as well. So again, we'll know more and kind of to see what they come up with, because one of the sticking points, one was the depreciation, because you're not going to get dollar for dollar back for the unused time. But also, I'm sure a sticking point is those pre-existing conditions. So those previously recommended but incomplete capital projects from the 2015 feasibility study. So that's something that's going to have to be worked out between the towns as well.
Mike, if I can say, I did talk to some members of our select boards, and that's what the understanding would be. It would be an agreement between Hamden and Wilbraham through the school committee.
Any other questions? Okay. And then, Bert, did you have any regional agreement updates?
No, I believe that the issue of the middle school is the last piece of the puzzle that needs to fall into place. There are 3 minor issues that have to do with things like how the ballots need to be printed. But I don't suspect that's going to be a showstopper. We are in the process of scheduling another meeting with the Office of Regional Governance to work through those smaller pieces.
Great. Our next planning committee meeting is, it's Tuesday, April 15th at 5:30 in the district office. Okay. So we will move on to the Finance, Operations, and Technology Subcommittee. Sean?
Yeah, at this point, we have nothing. I mean, we've already decided and we already went through, so thank you for that. Unless anyone has any questions, we can move on. All right.
I guess I only have one comment, just
Sure.
as I would, next budget cycle, I would recommend having more subcommittee meetings throughout the budget cycle. Just again, having both, because typically it's a subcommittee. We have Hamden Advisory and we have FinCom. We have those meetings and we're able to work, get more information as we're moving through the process. I find that to be helpful as a taxpayer, but also as a school committee member. It's helpful to kind of get that information from both towns. I think those are valuable.
Yeah, we're going to have a meeting later on to say what worked, what didn't work, what would be recommendations for next year, and such like that.
Thank you. Do you have a meeting date for our next meeting?
No, we do not.
Okay. So Alpeva Collaborative Representative, Lisa?
Nothing to report.
Negotiation Subcommittee, nothing to report at this time. Policy Subcommittee, Mike?
We have not met since our last meeting, but we do have a meeting coming up on April 9th at 5:30, I believe. And is it in
thank you. Do you have anything to report for the LPVEC Corporation?
Nothing to report. As I understand this meeting lasted less than 5 minutes.
Amazing. Congratulations.
4 minutes exactly.
Find out how that works. Okay, so we'll move on to the consent agenda.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? Okay, so we will do roll call. Cheryl?
Aye.
Tim?
Yes.
Sean?
Aye.
Lisa?
Yes.
Rich?
Aye.
Mike?
Yeah.
And myself, aye. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. So we'll continue with the superintendent's update.
Thank you. Our April 1st student enrollment is 2,870. That is up 4 students from last month. In your packet, I included our latest version of our MTSS design and catalog of aligned supports. The 2 major additions for this current year, which is represented in this current edition, are the addition of a section on tiered attendance supports and a section on decision rules to assist teams in making determinations about the efficacy of intervention efforts and deciding whether to discontinue or intensify interventions. I believe our tiered approach to student attendance is working, and this is important because students who were not chronically absent have consistently shown higher levels of achievement in our district and across the state. As of March 24th, we had 241 students who were chronically absent, meaning they'd missed 10% or more of school days at that point during the year. That's an overall absenteeism rate of about 9.2%. You may wonder why it's at that and not lower. It's because preschool and kindergarten are not included in your chronic absenteeism rate. As of March 2024, which was last year, our overall chronic absenteeism rate was 11.3. So we went from 11.3 to 9.2. That means we now have about 55 fewer students who are chronically absent in the district as compared to the number we had at the same time last year. As you will remember from my goal setting, we set out not only to reduce chronic absenteeism in the aggregate, but also to target specific subgroups of students who had shown higher rates of chronic absenteeism. So among the 241 students who are currently chronically absent, 4 are English language learners, 62 are students with disabilities, 86 are low-income students, and 38 are Hispanic or Latino. Based on these numbers, it appears that we're on track to significantly reduce chronic absenteeism among those selected student groups. So I'd really like to thank our families and staff for working together to improve student attendance. I really do think this will be to our students' benefit. And then we've only just begun to address the more consistent use of decision rules and started to think about how we could use that as a framework to consolidate the work of multiple student support teams and processes we have at work in the district. So this final section of our MTSS 2.0 document, the one on decision rules, really points the way to the next component we need to bring on board, and that'll be something that guides our efforts in the next school year. So I look forward to talking more about that in future updates on our multi-tiered systems of support, and that's my report.
Questions for John? Okay, thank you. Okay, so we will continue with, so with future agenda items, we have local sourcing of school lunches. Anything else? Okay, so we do the needs for executive session pursuant to Master General Law, see Chapter 30A, Section 21A, 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with HWEA or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. HWEA Unit A, C, and clerical. To discuss confidential matters related to the review and approval of executive minutes. C, 30A, Section 21A, 7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law, specifically Master General Law C-214, Section 1B, Massachusetts Student Records Law, Master General Law C-71, Section 34D, Massachusetts Student Records Regulations 603 CMR 23 et sequentia. and Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, 20 U.S.C. Section 1232G, 34 CFR, Part 99, regarding student transfer requests.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. So we will do roll call to move into executive session. We will not be returning. We will be adjourning from executive session and not be returning to regular session. So roll call to go into executive session. Cheryl? Tim?
Yes.
Sean?
Aye.
Lisa?
Yes.
Rich? Rich? Rich, are you there?
Yes?
Perfect. Mike? And myself, aye. So we're now moved to executive session, 6:30. I'm sorry. It is 7:40. Stuck in time.
Would a 5-minute biological be a smart move here? There we go.
All right, Mike, I'll call you back.